the February 11th, 2025 meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. This meeting is being hosted in a hybrid format. And I believe we are expecting, is Commissioner Topham with us?
I can see the attendees for some reason.
So if Commissioner Topham joins us remotely, then all votes will be by roll call. Here at the meeting is Commissioner Buscarin, Commissioner Marks, and myself.
We do have,
Gaspar.
yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, so, and we have Ms. Topham, can you hear us? Okay, once she gets connected, Ms. Topham, if you could, when you get your audio going, let us know, please. Perfect. Thank you. So we will take all votes by roll call. And Commissioner Planzer is not with us tonight. This meeting is being both audio and video recorded. And please identify yourself for the minutes. Are there any questions, concerns with the agenda as published? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. Are there any questions or concerns with the minutes of January 14th or January 28th? Hearing none, we'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. And I would entertain a motion to ratify the warrants of January 8th and January 22nd.
So moved. Second.
Motion been made and second. Is there any further discussion on the warrants? Hearing none, Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Garen?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. This will bring us to public comment for items that are not on the agenda. The public comment will follow the published policy. Please raise your hand. We don't have anyone in the room. Is there anybody online? No public.
We don't have anyone.
Thank you. So we'll move on to pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1. And Manager Carberg has joined us remotely, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to take a few items separately. We'll revisit the ramp license agreement next month. The license is fine. The firm can operate. I have all the faith in them. We'll just pick that up for the March meeting. And then for the airport manager agreement, I'll defer that back to you to administer, and I'll take the remaining 4 items together. Starting with the contract with Hortonville Consulting for, and I have an updated amount, $53,410. The update is, as I heard from Preston, Hortonville Consulting is going to be doing the fluorine-free foam testing for our ARF trucks. The remainder of the cost is $49,160. This is the 3-year cost for our required annual ARF training. I have change order number 4 with Pearl Construction for $19,616.55. There are 3 individual items on this change order. The first, $10,000, is the cost for the domestic fire and water suppression service connections for the dormitory building. It was a cost we had planned to pay directly to the water company via line item transfer. The contractor just went ahead and took care of this for us and is assessing it back to us as a pass-through cost. It's not marked up. So that's a $10,000 cost to them instead of from us to the water company. Then $3,627.35 is to add future gate valves for any further development of the site, such as the future townhouse. It's well worth that to do that work now, in my opinion. And it was not in our original scope. And then there's the remaining amount is $5,989.20, and that's for adjustments we elected to the modular house. It's an increase in price for plumbing fixtures and additional electrical outlets. I have 2 change orders, one with Industrial Protection Systems and one with Oshkosh. They're both related to the ARF truck, but they're in 2 separate contracts because they're in 2 separate grants. The first, change order 1, IPS, is a credit of $1,469.25. It's due to the deletion of a ladder that was to be supplied, and it's a calendar day extension. The industry is just backed up in providing vehicles and equipment, so it's an inconsequential delay to us. And then the second change order is for Oshkosh, a cost of $26,873. This cost includes the onboard foam proportioning system. It was not originally scoped with the truck when we first developed our scope. It was before the fluorine-free foams had passed mil spec. Subsequently, we elected to have the onboard foam proportioning system, and it has also become FAA eligible. So that will be available with typical AIP splits. There's also an additional calendar day adjustment. Again, Oshkosh is doing a great job for us, but there was some delay in the line and with the contract. And then the final item is I have a task order with McFarland Johnson for ramp lighting for $253,700. Again, this is AIP eligible. It's the design work associated with replacing, I believe, 17 light poles around South Ramp and Commercial Ramp. It is a little high, but I also asked for some extra time and design work on the photometric analysis, the means and methods for designing dark skies compliant features. It is going to take them a little bit more time, and I recognize that, and that's reflected in the task order. Be happy to take any questions on those items, but I recommend approval on all.
Does anyone have any questions? Any of those contracts? Is there a motion to approve the contracts and contract amendments just reviewed by Manager Carver?
So moved.
Your second?
Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And Chair votes aye. And then that will bring us on to the contract with Warren Smith for deployment agreement for the position of the new airport manager. We've worked through this for quite some time. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns with executing the contract?
No.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Topham, any questions? Excuse me, Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And that will bring us on to pending matters. South Ramp Apron Ramp Expansion Project update, Mr. Carver.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few items for your review. The noise monitoring systems have been partially integrated. We found that we had bad power supplies on both units, and that is getting resolved, but the items do work. The software does integrate. The contractor and the provider will be providing the updated power supplies, and we will get this piece finalized. So we're happy to have that done. We're happy to have not done, we're happy to have that problem identified. I've also included in your packet the South Apron Air Quality Technical Report. We've discussed this in previous meetings, and now I have it for your and public distribution in the packet. I don't have this prepared for formal presentation, but I am offering the following major points as summary items. The model that we ran assumed the heaviest aircraft activity, the busiest use cases, and our hot operational plan. Locally recorded meteorological conditions. So the model that we ran was based off of conditions recorded on site in the previous year, assuming what amounts to a busiest case or a worst case scenario. We modeled two conditions, a pre and a post South Ramp expansion construction. Total emissions of all criteria pollutants were reduced. And I'd also say this is a baseline study. We have it now, it's available, and we can continue to run additional use cases in the future based on any changes we see to aircraft activity or operations that we may want to model, and we can understand those changes to air quality. So it's a good tool for the commission to have, and it's a good tool for the commission to use as a comparison if they would like to run future analyses for use cases, aircraft operations, or changes to the fleet mix. And then for the sound barrier design, I have a short introduction, and then I'm going to defer it over to our consultants at McFarland Johnson. But we are finalizing the sound barrier design. We're looking to go out to bid in March and receive those bids to inform any actions or adjustments, excuse me, that might be needed at annual town meeting floor. Just a reminder, there is a balancing act here in issuing bids. We always want to receive bids ahead of town meeting, but under state law, contractors only have to hold their bid prices for, I believe it's 3 months. Rich could correct me if I'm wrong, until a contract is executed. So if we go to bid too early in the capital process, our bid prices can become stale. And if we go too late, we don't have that information to inform any action at annual town meeting. So that is our process. So I believe we have both Mr. Laston here and Mr. Patel. Rich, I'd first defer to you to present the memo on construction materials and the benefits that you've outlined. I'm not sure if you're going to defer that back to Mr. Patel, though.
I will.
Can we, did we go back to the emissions report before we
Of
move on
course.
to the? Mr. Lasden, do you have anything that you wanted to add regarding the emissions report?
No, not in particular. No, we had our sub HMMH develop that document, and it was prepared based on a scope that was written early on in the project between the airport and others, and that's the outcome of the report based on the scope that they were asked to perform it against.
Does anybody else have any questions?
No.
Was any actual testing done, or is this all modeling?
They did not have some of the aircraft at the time at your airport, so they did have to go out and get. I'm sorry, this is noise or is this emissions? I'm sorry.
No, this is
It's-
emissions.
Emissions.
The air quality technical report.
So what I'm asking is, was there any sampling done related to this report, or is it all just theoretical modeling?
Let me go back and check. I don't want to answer that right away. I got to go back and check. I don't remember offhand.
I believe I can answer that.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's all theoretical. It's modeling. The way noise emissions are calculated in the FAA and airport environments are through, I believe, AEDT version 3, which is a modeling-based software. So there wasn't a deployment of, NOx and SOx and ozone monitors associated with this work. It's a modeling basis.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. It wasn't, my understanding when we started this was that we were actually going to do a round of emissions to get that baseline. And perhaps we're going back a few years, and perhaps I misunderstood, but that was what I had thought we were looking to establish prior to the operation, the expansion, so that we would know if there was a delta post-construction. But again, perhaps that was lost in translation, or I mistaken, but that's what I thought we were looking to do. Essentially there's a whole lot of just data pages that got included here, but I think there's one page that I sort of focused on, which was the pre and post construction conditions table. But again, this is very technical, and that was where I was wondering if there was any from our consultants sort of more general terms of what this means, as opposed to like 0.00017, right? Like what does that mean as a delta? Everything is negative. So I mean, essentially the models are that we've built this ramp and we've reduced the emissions. That's the conclusion of the modeling. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, if I may,
Yes,
Mr. Chair. Only because I was involved in it. The greatest source of emission reduction comes from more efficient taxi-in times. In the summer, winds are predominantly from the southwest. Aircraft arrive runway 24. They're exiting taxiway Echo onto the new taxiway Lima or onto Juliet and finding their way into the ramp very quickly. So that's driving all of the pollution reductions is the large scale over the course of 10,000 operations fleet-wide reduction. There's also a general locational reduction. You have receptors, which in this case means residential homes. Receptors adjacent to the south ramp between the ARF station and Juliet see a reduction in overall values. Receptors closest to the south ramp extension, again, assuming a worst case scenario, see a small increase. But all of the magnitude of those changes are all very low regardless. None of them are even approaching the criteria pollutant levels set by the EPA. Cameron and Rich, does that square with your readings as well?
Yes, I would agree with that.
okay, thank you. I hope it proves out. Anybody else? All right, thanks. So on to the noise wall, please.
Okay. Mr. Lassen, I'll defer to you.
Okay, can I share my screen?
Yep.
I will share my screen. So let me know when you can see my screen.
We can.
Okay, so we for the sound wall, we went and met with a series of manufacturers to try to
No, we don't.
understand. I'm sorry?
We can't see it.
Oh, let me try again. Now?
Negative.
No.
All right, it's not letting it share.
There you go.
Oh, here it is.
Oh, there we go. All right, now I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so for the sound wall, we went and met with a series of sound wall manufacturers to try to talk to them about what kind of products there are, what's the durability, where they've been constructed, and we were able to come up with 4 types of walls that have been used for this purpose. A perforated PVC wall, a fiberglass wall, a precast concrete wall, and timber panels. And then as part of the team, we discussed with HMMH and with discussions with the airport and the commission about what's called an absorptive wall or a reflective wall. And those are just that. Reflective wall essentially bounces the sound back into the transportation entity. And there is some theory in the industry that some of that sound will sort of creep up over the top. And then there's another wall called an absorptive wall where it actually absorbs the sound waves and better mitigates the noise. So we looked at both of those. We also looked at, does, as I said, some of the noise sort of creeps along the wall. If we slope the roof and if we put sort of bent sides in, does that help sort of capture the noise into the area? And we looked at that and modeled it. HMH gave us some opinions that said if we sort of slope the top towards the airfield and put some sidewalls in to sort of close the noise, that would help. And that an absorptive wall would be the best material for the goal that we're trying to achieve. And so the 4 types of walls we looked at, Silent Protector is this perforated PVC sound wall. It's a PVC shell. The perforations and interior to that is a mineral wool product that actually absorbs the sound. For the fiberglass wall, it's a fiberglass panel, and it's got just a series of dimples in the wall to sort of capture the sound in the panel. There's a concrete wall, and the concrete wall is made, the aggregate and the concrete material are made with absorptive properties It's actually some wood fiber and some other stuff in there to help capture the sound. And then wood is just wood. So we looked at all four of those, talked to some manufacturers about durability and construction costs and resiliency. The resiliency as far as Nantucket, as far as the salt spray, a challenge, but most of the walls are along highways where they have salt spray from road splash in the wintertime. So all of them did sort of recognize salt in that condition. So we went and put together this table and rated them construction costs. Now, construction costs, we did our best we could based on discussions with manufacturers and some prices that we've seen. We did not have Nantucket prices to use, so this was more of a order of magnitude comparator between the four products as opposed to the Nantucket sort of construction cost. So, you can see in the table, the timber is the cheapest, concrete is the highest, and then the other two were sort of in the middle, as we called them. And then maintenance costs, the PVC has the lowest maintenance costs, and then wood and concrete have the highest, and et cetera. You can see on the other ones. So, and then in the last column was the reduction in noise, and that was the HMMH recommended that we get at least a 0.9 in reduction of noise. So the first two, or the perforated PVC and the fiberglass, both met that as sort of the minimums, and the last two met that only as the maximums. So in looking at all of these, our recommendation would be to go with the perforated PVC with mineral wool absorptive material.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions?
Yeah, do we have any examples of what the perforated PVC with the mineral wool in it has been installed and the longevity? I feel PVC, in my experience, tends to be destroyed in fairly short order. Just curious what they've done
Yes,
to.
there actually is a PVC wall, excuse me, installed on I-90 in the Worcester area. I can sort of find out better statistics for you, but yes, there is one in the area.
And what is the expected longevity of this product?
Most of the manufacturers will tell you they have a service life of up to 40 years in their published literature.
Yep. Okay. And will they be able to use the 45-degree or some angle return along the top of this wall?
Yes, we did confirm that they do that. Yes.
And I just looked at their literature and I saw that they claim to be able to do the walls up to 30 feet high. So we're not going that high. So it seems like it's
Correct.
The product itself through the manufacturer's information is fairly impressive. And I will just say that when we started this, this isn't the product that I had first come up with, just searching, not with any technical sort of review. But I'm happy to see us going in a direction of a modular type of a system as opposed to trying to create a precast 20-foot wall. I think this is a better approach for the Nantucket logistics, and I think we will end up with a more aesthetic and a better functioning product. Now, I think the hardest part is they claim the load rating, and seeing how it really does perform over time, with our environment and our wind and challenges that we have. But I'd like to see us proceed with the recommended product. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Mr. Lasden, do you need anything further to continue on with this?
No, we're good. Thank you.
And I think we would be interested, now that you have a direction on this, once you are able to get some numbers, Understanding they'll still be rough till it actually, goes out to bid or however we're gonna proceed with that, but to start to get us somewhere in the ballpark of what we might be looking at for this would be helpful, I think.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I
yeah.
raise just one question for Mr. Laston?
Please.
With this type of material for the wall, does that have any impacts on the foundations and the bases, or are those still, deep pier concrete?
There's still, it's really to hold itself up against the wind. So that it's still going to be some kind of a drilled shaft foundation or a caisson. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
But theoretically, we may be able to do that like on a per post type basis, you think, or on this kind of a system, or is it actually going to be a foundation, you think, that would run the length of the wall?
Sometimes there's to use the term, a grade beam along the ground. They don't have to. We'll have to sort of look and see what this manufacturer do. Some of them have a sort of a metal frame across the bottom. We sort of have to see what this manufacturer sort of recommends.
Mhm. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Anything further on the noise barrier?
No.
And timing, Mr. Lasden, to when we may hear back from you with a further update on this?
We can either send stuff through the airport manager, or we can wait till the next commission meeting.
Yeah, if you thought we'd have something for the next commission meeting, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. There's nothing further. Back to you, Mr. Coburg.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the purpose of the next item, which is the PFAS investigation update, I'd like to defer to Cameron Woods, Environmental Coordinator, for her update and to introduce the consultant presentation.
Wood.
Hi, everyone. Not too many updates today for PFAS. I did want to share that since the last airport commission meeting, we released to the public that we would be transitioning away from AFFF and moving to a fluorine-free solution in all of our ARF vehicles. We also shared that we would be receiving the new ARF vehicle, which we did, and that is already being fitted to take the F3. It has never seen AFFF, and so we're very excited about that element of moving forward with our transition plan. We also have, within that press release, shared that there would be an IFB for, for transitioning the 2 trucks that need to go off island for that, and that IFB is scheduled at this point for February 26th to open. But beyond that, I did want to introduce Jim Sukup, our LSP from Weston Solutions, who is here to present to the commission.
Welcome, Mr. Sukup.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, or attempt to share my screen. All right, did that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Had more luck than Rich.
Well,
I'm not bragging. I got lucky. Well, thanks for having me. We're going to provide an update here. Our last update was in October at the October 8th commission meeting. And we've made some fairly significant progress, I believe, since that time. So we'll catch you up. An overview of the work that we performed during that time is we did some additional supplemental sampling of the homes on the west side. So I'll walk through that. As a result of that sampling, we did further updates to the disposal site boundary. We'll walk through that. And as a result of that sampling, we identified additional homes that needed to be connected to the water line. We'll discuss that. We installed off-site monitoring wells in the residential area to the west in an effort to further define and confirm groundwater flow directions in that area. And then the majority of our work has been on the phase 3 evaluation of remedial alternatives. And we'll walk through that, what that process looked like, and provide a brief overview of the remedial alternatives that we're considering. So let's jump into the supplemental sampling. You may recall that we submitted our phase 2 investigation report in March of last year, just almost a year ago now. And shortly after we submitted that report, EPA came out with new MCLs for PFAS in May, a couple months after we submitted our report, and those values were significantly lower than the Mass DEP values that we had been using. So after meeting with Mass DEP and discussing that with them, they indicated to us that their intention was that they were going to be adopting these lower levels at some point in the future, and they recommended that we be proactive and look at the existing data that we had to compare that to the lower EPA levels to see what kind of an impact that might have. So we did that. We issued a phase 2 an addendum, so an addendum to our phase 2 report, where we basically assessed the impact of the EPA MCLs based on existing data that we had already had from the west side, and that data was several years old, back when we first started our PFAS investigation. And as a result of that, we did end up expanding the disposal site boundary to the west as part of the phase 2 addendum, and we recommended that additional homes be sampled on the west side, and that I kind of went through that at the October 8th meeting. So between October 8th and now, we've implemented that. So we went out and we resampled all homes that were within the expanded disposal site boundary, and I got a map. I'll show you that in a minute. And those that abut it. So we resampled basically all the homes on the west side that were impacted by the expanded disposal site boundary. And initially, we had identified 20 homes that met that criteria, so that were within the disposal site boundary or that directly abutted the disposal site boundary. And in our first attempt in September, we were able to sample 15 of those 20. The other 5, the residents didn't respond to our request to sample or denied our request to sample. So we were able to sample 15 of the 20 that we had identified. And based on that sampling, we had 3 of the 15 that exceeded the Mass DEP GW1 standard of 20 part per trillion. And there was another home, one home that exceeded the EPA MCL of 4. So we had basically 4 exceedances and again, I got a map I'm going to show you in a minute once we get through with this slide, and I'll show you where all that happened. So based on this initial sampling in September, we scheduled another sampling event in December of 2024. We targeted 9 homes that time, and of those 9, 5 were the homes that we didn't get back in September. We went back to those 5 homes and tried again. And then we added an additional 4 homes as well, based on the exceedances that we identified in the September round. So we kind of stepped out. And the results of that, all of those, so we were able to get 6 of the 9 in that event. We had 3 homeowners that either didn't respond or would not provide access. And at this point, they weren't providing. They were not providing access. So we're not going to be doing any further attempts to sample those. We've asked them twice. They've denied us twice. So we're not going to be chasing those remaining 3 homes any further. So of those 6 that we sampled, all 6 results were below the Mass DEP standard of 20. 2 of the 6 did exceed the EPA MCLs, so the 4 PPT. So they were between 4 and 20. But they had the pine tree signature. And you'll recall that we have what we call the airport source. The PFAS contamination at the airport has a very distinct signature. So when we get our results from these homes to the west, we compare the PFAS signature from those samples with the airport signature and with also the signature from the Pine Tree Street release. And based on that evaluation, we determine whether the home has been impacted by the airport or the upgradient Pine Tree source. And as I said, the 2 of the 6 that did exceed the MCL had a pine tree signature, not an airport source. So with that, let's go to the map, and I think this will make a little bit more sense. So we'll walk you through here. So the red line here is the original disposal site boundary. This is the original boundary that we had in the phase two. And it's basically the airport property line, right? It's basically the fence line. Based on the EPA MCL that was lowered and our conversations with Mass DEP, they said, no, you really need to consider the EPA MCL. And also we had further understanding, first of all, that the airport gas property needed to be included in our disposal site. They basically told us that in no uncertain terms, because the airport owns that property. Even though the airport gas is a tenant, the airport owns the property, therefore they are a responsible party. So we added that to the disposal site. And also our understanding of how the geothermal well system works. And the fact that that groundwater is being recharged up in this area, that kind of explained the contamination we were seeing off property to the west. So based on those lines of evidence, we revised the disposal site boundary to this green line. And this is the green line is the disposal site boundary, expanded disposal site boundary that we included in the phase two addendum report that we submitted in June. So what we did, again, for our sampling is we wanted to sample all the homes that were within the expanded disposal site boundary, resample all those homes because they hadn't been sampled since back when we first started doing the investigations in 2020, 2021. That time frame, we were doing the step-out sampling. We resampled all those homes. Anybody that was not already connected to town water, if they were already connected to town water, and that's what these blue triangles indicate, is that these homes are connected to the water line. If they're connected to the water line, we didn't sample them. And then we sampled all the ones that directly abutted it. So that were just outside the line so that we could verify that the line was drawn in the right spot. So that was the intent of the additional sampling. So the 4 homes that exceeded, I mentioned there were 4 homes that exceeded in the first round. Those are the red dots. One is SL was located well within the disposal site boundary. Historically, that sample had been non-detect, but we resampled them and they had shot up and they were actually above the 20. And then these 2, one on Nobadeer, one on Skyline, and one on Nantucket, that were just outside the disposal site boundary. And those exceeded. And these 3, Nobadeer, Skyline exceeded the MCP 20 PPT threshold. And the signature was at least partially from the airport, indicating that there was some airport contribution to the PFAS that we were seeing in those wells. So so we expanded the disposal site boundary around those properties, and we provided bottled water to those folks immediately, and we got them on the list to be connected to town water. This home here off Monahans was exceeded the EPA MCL, but it did not exceed the MCP threshold. But again, looking forward to down the road, Mass DEP has indicated that they're going to adopt those EPA MCLs. So to be proactive, we included that home as well. The blue dots are homes that we sampled during the second round of sampling. So after the first round, we had those exceedances, so we did some step outs, or homes that we didn't get in the first round. We went back and resampled. So you can see we did a lot more sampling up in the Nobadeer Way area to make sure that we had this line in the right spot. Also in this area, since we had a detection here, we wanted to sample these homes again, make sure that this line was going to be in the right spot. It didn't need to go out further. And our data, as I indicated, confirmed that. So these concentrations either were below the EPA MCL or and actually in all the cases were the signature, the PFAS signature we saw in those was indicative of the Pine Tree Road source. So this is the Pine Tree Road source up here. So those were attributable to the plume that's coming down from the north from this way. That's not related to airport activities. All right.
Maybe we could stop right there for
Yeah.
a second.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any questions? No, at this point. Just to be clear, I think this is obvious, but hopefully for everybody else and to clarify for me, the magenta colored dots is meant to signify the pine tree signature and not the airport signature, correct?
That is correct. That's correct.
If it
The green dots are airport signature.
But exceeding the standard.
Correct. It exceeded a standard and was airport signature. So it was, yes, at least partially airport signature.
Okay. And these have property owners been notified of the results?
Yes, the property owners were notified of the results immediately after we got our sample results back. They get a notification letter indicating what the results were, and they get a copy of the laboratory reports. And then if they exceeded, we offered them bottled water at that point as well.
You offered bottled water to the exceedances with the pine tree signature?
No, we did not.
Right. So what I'm trying to understand from a community perspective is that we're in the vicinity of the airport, but we are now looking to, the airport did the sampling, found an exceedance, has notified the owners of that, but said that the airport is not responsible for that PFAS. Is that correct?
Correct, but let me qualify it. There were no exceedances of the Mass DEP standard of the 20 ppt, so which is really the applicable standard. There were exceedances there were a couple homes in the Nobodere Way area. I believe these were all non-detect. The Nobodere Way area, which is much closer to the Pine Tree Road source, the concentrations in this area were higher, but they were between 4 and 20. I think there were 2 homes in here that exceeded 4 but less than 20. So they don't exceed the Mass DEP standard, but they do exceed the EPA MCL, which is not not applicable to individual drinking water. So it's really not an applicable standard.
Okay. I feel like we should communicate this information to the town at some point. That we have, done this sampling and, there are these are the results. And you're not saying that the town's on the hook for it either, but I think that I want to make sure that there is a line of communication and we have shared that with, I presume it's Mr. Larson, and the town manager, just to make sure that they're aware of what we've done, whether it gets posted or what have you. I think it would be positive to be proactive in providing this information to them. And then I had a question about the houses between the 2 different maps that are designated. I think it's PTA and PTE, right down along kind of the point, if you will, along the airport fence. And one of them, it's a little hard because the map that you have, this map isn't dated, and you have draft on there. So am I to understand that this is current and that the red line is yet another disposal boundary adjustment? Or is that the same boundary adjustment that we discussed a few months ago?
This is a new one. So the green one is the one that I presented back in October that was submitted to DEP in the phase 2 addendum. So that's in quotes locked in, if you will. And those notification letters that we sent out to the residents that were within the disposal site are the ones within the green line. The red line is based on the results that we got back in September and December. So those are new. So based on that, we're recommending another expansion of the disposal site boundary in those 3 locations.
And the red dot, not the red circle, indicates an exceeding the Mass DEP standard of the 20. Just because
Correct.
I don't understand this because your legend is cut off.
Yeah. It's meant to be a just kind of a visual for the presentation. That's not really a report quality figure. We're actually finalizing the IRA status report, which is due end of this month,
Okay.
to be submitted, and that will have all of this in it final, with all the maps. And my recommendation would be that would probably be the good document to provide to the town, because it will essentially lay all this out in a nice neat package. Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you. That's all I wanted to make sure that I think I agree with you. If everyone else does, that's the time. But we have this, and I think we have some sensitivity here to the situation of these properties that are just outside of the boundary, but are in that in between the 2 different standards that, you know, might come up at some point that might need to be readdressed. But okay, this is helpful. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah. Like I said, it's really just the Nobody Way area where you have that situation. Everything else was either below the MCL or not attacked.
Well, there's the one on the corner of Skyline and Webster, though. Anyway,
This one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that just means it was sampled. The blue just means it was sampled as part of the second sampling round. Yeah.
Next round.
Well, when you said next round, we're gonna do that yet again, or?
No, I'm at the second round of sampling in December. So the blue dot, the only thing the blue dot indicates is that that location was sampled in December.
Okay, so next isn't from here. Next is from a previous.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's what I was trying to understand.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, You know, I tried to delete that and I couldn't figure out how to do it when I was preparing the graphics for this presentation.
I understand that. I just trying to understand what's proposed steps from here as I look at this for additional sampling. Thanks.
Yeah, we're actually not proposing any further sampling at this time on the west side.
Thank you. I'm good if you want to keep going.
Okay. So this is like I said, the disposal site boundary. We revisited that and revised that based on the results from this last 2 rounds of sampling. So the September and the December rounds of sampling. And again, it was based on the PFAS signature, which verified the disposal site. And it includes the 3 homes. So this is basically the same figure we kind of just looked at without the blue dots on it. And showing the 3 areas where we're going to expand the disposal site boundary, and that'll be done in this IRA status report that we're preparing now. That's when we'll formally submit that to Mass DEP. That we're going to be expanding that, and then we'll need to send letters to those 3 residents, or actually it's 4. I think there's 2 on nobody here. This home is already connected to town water, but they are now within the disposal site, so we'll have to notify them.
Okay.
Question? Okay. That's
I
my
think
question
so. Yeah, well, sorry, go ahead.
PFAS now, or?
No, I think we're gonna keep going. We're
Yep,
gonna talk about the monitoring wells. What did you want to, before we get to that? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Sukup.
Okay.
Please.
So as a result of the sampling, the connection to, we're basically connecting all those homes up to the water line. So kind of as just to summarize, we've offered connection to all homes that are within the disposal site boundary that had any detection of PFAS. So if you were in our disposal site boundary, inside that green and red line expanded, and you had any detection of PFAS, even if it was below the EPA standard, we offered to connect you up. And that basically included 4 homes on MVR that qualified. They've all agreed to be connected. There is 1 home on MVR that's still not going to be connected to the water line because they've been consistently been non-detect. So after I don't know, probably 20 rounds of sampling, it's consistently non-detect. So that's the only home on MVR that's not going to be hooked up. And those homes are in various stages of being connected. I think we had reached out. I don't think they're all quite connected yet. We reached out. It was in this fall, and a lot of those some of those homes had been already winterized. So I think they're teed up. MJ's got them teed up to be connected in the spring. And then there are 13 homes on the west side. Based on that disposal site boundary. And again, they're in various stages of being connected. MJ's doing a great job. Rob over there working with the residents and working with the contractors to get that all lined up and get that expedited. So this is a map basically just showing the homes that are being connected. So like I said, there were 4 down on MVR. The one green dot in the middle, that's the one that has consistently been non-detect. It's kind of in between the eastern plume and the western plume. So as of this time, that home has not been offered to be connected, and we continue to monitor that home. We test that home twice a year, in May and August of every year, just to make sure. So let me zoom in a little bit. Here we go. So these are the homes within on the west side that are being connected, and you can see they're the ones that are inside. I know it's busy, a lot going on in this figure, but this is the green line here, showing the expanded disposal site boundaries. These homes are all inside. These homes that you see here are the ones where we're expanding the disposal site boundary around those now, and then the one up here on Nobody. So those are the homes that are being connected. Oops. I'm not sure why I did that. Offsite monitoring wells. So as part of the phase 2 addendum, we included a recommendation to install monitoring wells in a residential area to the west. We want to confirm groundwater flow patterns in this area and get groundwater elevation and groundwater quality data from those wells. When we looked at the area to the west, we discovered that many of the roads in this area are privately owned, which represents a lot of difficulties in trying to get access to those roads, to get access agreements to put in monitoring wells. So we worked with the town to identify locations that we could install the wells along town roads, and that kind of helped avoid the access issues. We installed 8 monitoring wells in mid-December. One of the 8 wells we drilled, I got a map I'm going to show you in a second, but one of the 8 wells we actually drilled on airport property. We were going to put it on Monahans, and it was right outside the fence. And we're like, the town is getting ready to do, is planning some upgrades and work on Monahans, so they're going to be tearing that up. So we felt it was safer to put that well just inside the fence. It's only a few feet from where we had wanted to put it. And that way it's protected and it's on the airport property. So we've got a synoptic round. So the wells are in now. They've been developed. They're ready to go. We had planned to do a round of water level measurements this week, but with the storms coming in, we had to reschedule that. So we've rescheduled that to, and I think your package actually may say tomorrow, which is when we had planned to go out, but with the storm, we pushed it off till next week. So we're fighting the weather a little bit there. Once we get our groundwater measurements, we'll take those groundwater elevations, plot them on a map, contour them, and then look at what that tells us as far as evaluating the groundwater flow patterns to the west side. And then we're planning on sampling those wells as part of our spring round in April, when we'll do a site-wide sampling round of all the monitoring wells on the airport at the same time. So this is kind of an overview map that shows the locations of the 8 monitoring wells. This is the one that we put, like I said, on the airport property. So they're scattered around. Ideally, we would have liked to have had some wells in this area, more in the middle. I had more here, but again, these roads are all privately owned. So we had to kind of push them out to the west or to the east onto a town-owned road. So so that's the location of those. That brings us down to the phase 3. So, like I said, this is kind of where a large majority of our efforts have been focused over the last few months. So a phase 3 is basically an evaluation of remedial alternatives. We've spent, the last 3 or 4 years investigating the property, understanding the extent of the groundwater and soil contamination. We've got that figured out for the most part. Now it's time to evaluate, okay, what are we going to do about this? What remedies do we have to are applicable that we need to consider? So that report is due to Mass DEP by March 3rd, so a little less than a month now. And the phase 3 has to take into consideration, well, our phase 3 did take into consideration the fact that we've connected residents with PFAS detections to the existing water line. So we've mitigated the immediate risk, the current risk, right? People drinking the water. As soon as we found out somebody was drinking water, we got them on bottled water. We got them on poets. Eventually, we got them hooked up to the water line. So we've mitigated the current risk. So really what we're doing with these remedies, these remedial alternatives, is addressing future risk, right? Long-term risks associated with the site. And those are basically two. The restoration of groundwater within the zone 2, and the zone 2, you'll recall, is that area at the northwest corner of the airport that's within the zone 2, within the wellhead protection zone for the Wannacomet wells. So groundwater within that zone has the potential, theoretically, to get drawn into the Wannacomet wells as a long-term risk. So that's why we're focused on restoration of that groundwater. Similarly, the soils in that area have the potential to leach to groundwater. Basically, it's that soil contamination that's continuing to leach to groundwater that's causing the groundwater plume that then has the potential to impact the Wannacomet wells. So those are the areas that we're focusing our remedial actions on for the most part. And then there's the evaluation being conducted in accordance with Mass DEP guidance for doing those. So the way the process works is you identify all remedial technologies that could be applicable. So kind of the full universe of technologies that would work for soil or groundwater on PFAS. And then you take the ones that are applicable, and you combine the applicable ones into several or handful usually of remedial alternatives. And then you evaluate those remedial alternatives based on 8 criteria. And these are the criteria that you evaluate them based on: effectiveness, implementability, reliability, timeliness, benefits, risk, effect on the local area, and then cost. And then based on that evaluation, you select a preferred alternative. So the kind of answer, if you will, for the phase 3 evaluation process will be a selected preferred alternative that you would then move forward with. So we divided the alternatives up into soil and groundwater. So the soil alternatives that we're looking at right now are no action, and no action you always include in these evaluations as a baseline for comparison of the other options. So it's not that we would do no action. We're not going to walk away from this. We're not going to do nothing, but we include it as a line item for comparison. Natural attenuation. So this would be basically natural flushing of the PFAS from the soil via rainfall over time. So if you just allowed that rainfall to continue to fall, you're not flying any more AFFF. There's a finite amount of material there. Eventually, it'll flush itself out, wash itself out, down to the groundwater, and then flow off to the ocean over time. So we're looking at that. Obviously, the downside to that is it's going to take a long time, right? It's not going to happen overnight. We've got a very thick, unsaturated zone there. I think it's like 30 to 40 feet. So that's a lot of distance that the PFAS would need to be flushed out of that zone. that would take a while. Capping is another alternative that we're looking at, and there's different ways to do that. You could do it. It could be concrete. It could be asphalt. You could be an engineered vegetated cap. So you'd have like an HDP liner, which topsoil over it and vegetate it. And these capping options could be done in concert with additional expansion or capital projects that you may have for the airport. If you need more ramp space, if you need, you would like to pave the area for the Civil Air Patrol, or the not Civil Air Patrol, the Civil Aviation tie downs, for example. If that's something that you guys were considering, we could work that into this and dovetail that. So capping in place is one option. Excavation with on-site treatment. So in this case, we would dig up the soil that's contaminated, that exceeds, in this case, the GW1 S2 standards, or the majority of it might be some sort of a hybrid where we just do hot spots down to a certain depth. But basically excavate that contaminated soil with on-site treatment. So we would build a cell, we would soil wash it, essentially accelerating the natural flushing process. You'd wash the soil until it was clean. Testing confirmed it was clean, and then you put it back, and then you backfill it. Very disruptive, right? Because you got a big hole in an area that's highly trafficked. And it takes a while. The soil washing process can take anywhere from weeks to months to get that completed. So the hole would have to be open for quite some time. So that's something that would need to be taken into account, that we're evaluating as well. And then our last option is excavation with off-site or off-island disposal. There's no place on island to dispose of the soil. And we included this one as kind of the high cost option. Like the no action option is essentially the low cost baseline. This is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. This would be the most expensive excavation of contaminated soil, off-site disposal, off-island disposal, and then backfilling with clean fill, which you'd have to import probably on island as well. So that would be very expensive. It would also be very disruptive to the local residents because you're shipping a lot of material. There's a lot of trucks, a lot of noise, a lot of emissions that would be associated with that option. But we want to be able to show that for comparative purposes.
Can we stop there for a second?
Absolutely.
Any questions on the soil?
Not on the soil.
What approximately is the extent? You might not be able to answer this right now, but I'm just curious. And if you can, it would be great. In square footage that we're talking about for within the zone 2 of area that you expect we need to remediate. Is it an acre? Is it 5 acres? I mean, what are we talking about? Footprint-wise?
I don't have that off the top of my head. Obviously the area that we're talking about, we've got the Sun Island area up in this area where that little Quonset hut is, right? So there would be an area in here. This area is fairly small. But there's an area, which is what we're calling the 15 approach, runway 15 approach area. There's contamination here. And we don't have this necessarily all fully delineated. So as part of the next phase is the phase 3 is basically what we call in engineering a conceptual design, right? You're looking at what's the concept that you would apply, what's the best concept. The remedial design, or it's the next phase, is more the detailed design. So in that phase is where we would identify what's the exact footprint of soil that would have to be removed. We do have some estimates that we're using for cost comparison, because obviously you have to, as part of the concept design evaluation, you have to have some baseline that you're comparing the alternatives to. But it's not necessarily cast in stone. But I'm sorry, I don't have that. I don't have the off the top.
No, that's fine. But I mean, I'm just zoomed in on what you're looking, and it's certainly in the tens of acres, I would be thinking. So, and
It is
again, I guess.
shallow. I will say that it is. But you're right. It's a big area, but it's basically the upper 4 feet.
Mhm. And given the test results on that map that you have, this is where the soils, if basically, and it had the red dots were the soil samples. On this map, I know the purpose of this one was for the water line, but, obviously it looks like it's gonna be a pretty big project. And I guess my other question is, I understand including no action on most alternative analysis, but it seems that it's equivalent to the natural attenuation in this case. Natural attenuation is essentially that you would take no action. So why wouldn't you combine those two line items? Or even for purposes of, unless I'm missing something, what's the difference between no action and natural attenuation?
Yeah, and you're right. They are very similar. The difference is that it's the natural attenuation would be monitored. So we would go out and we would sample, say once a year, once every 2 years.
Fair enough.
So there's cost associated with that. So it's really technically it's monitored natural attenuation, and that's generally what you talk about when you're talking about groundwater. So that's the cost component to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the
I see.
active component, if you will. Yep.
Okay. And you're scheduled to have this alternatives analysis completed by
I believe next week is when it's the draft report is. I'm reviewing the draft text this week, so I believe it's scheduled to go out to the airport for review next week.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Soils. So I guess we're on to groundwater remediation.
Yes, groundwater alternatives. So groundwater, similar, no action is the first one. Again, monitored natural attenuation. This time we added the word monitored. And again, it's the natural flushing over time of PFAS over time. Now, for groundwater, it's actually a much faster process because the groundwater flow rates at the site are pretty quick. So there's I believe it's on the order of 700 feet, 600 to 700 feet per year. Groundwater moves. So the groundwater moves very quickly. So the groundwater will flush itself out certainly much more quickly than the soil. But you've got that overlying soil, which is going to continue to, as the rainfall falls on the site, to flush that into the groundwater, which is going to kind of maintain the groundwater concentration. So that's why the overall remedy for the site will be a combination of a soil remedy and a groundwater remedy. But you have to take that into consideration. So it may be that we're more aggressive on the soil side and remedy the soil, but then rely on natural flushing for the groundwater, just based on the higher flow rates there. One of the things that we would do is in the next phase, the phase 4, is we would probably do some leaching tests of the soil, the unsaturated soil, and find out what the leaching rates are. And that will give us a better idea to lock in what that time frame would be for the soil. So that's monitoring natural attenuation. So the third option is relocation of the geothermal system. So the geothermal system we know is it's basically drawing in water from the runway 15 approach plume up in that zone 2 area, and then it's used to heat the building, and then it's recharged over by Airport Road in the essentially over by the rental car parking lot. Where the injection well is. So that's spreading that contamination, pulling the contamination to the west, and then spreading it even further to the west. So we want to stop that. Right? We want to mitigate that. So this option includes moving those systems, both the extraction and the injection wells, to the area east of the terminal building, and we would add treatment of the pumped water. So at this point, we wouldn't. We're not going to change the size of the system. We're just going to move the system and add treating of the water. And where we move that system, we can put those extraction wells and injection wells in an area or at locations that would help to treat that runway 15 approach plume, which is the higher concentration plume. So so that would definitely have a very large beneficial effect in that it'll stop the spreading to the west, which will allow those homes on the west side that area to flush out more quickly and clean up. Not going to do anything for Pine Tree, but it's not our problem. And then and it will also, because we're going to be treating the water that's captured from the runway 15 approach plume would be treated. Would be, we'd be removing contamination from that plume, so you'd be accelerating that process. So, that's kind of a win-win on both sides there. The fourth option is the same, basically relocation of the geothermal wells, but we would basically have an expanded groundwater pump and treat system. So we would supplement it with additional pumping wells and additional injection wells to fully capture the runway 15 approach plume and the Sun Island plume as well. So it's kind of a more robust version of the second one, of the third option. And then the last option is, again, it also includes the geothermal well option, because, again, we need to do that to stop that spreading to the west. But we would combine that with installation of an in-situ treatment curtain. So this is a curtain. It's where you inject. You drill down with injection points and wells, spaced very close together along a line, and you can inject amendments. For the most part, it's activated carbon. There are a couple of other different amendments that are on the market as well, but it's basically you're injecting activated carbon, very fine grained stuff, into the aquifer. So you're creating a curtain, and then the groundwater flows through that and gets absorbed onto the carbon and essentially gets treated. So then when it comes out the other side of the curtain, it's clean or below the standard. So we would do that type of technology. We're looking at two locations for that. One would be basically along the airport boundary within that zone 2 area. So that essentially along the airport boundary to the northwest corner of the airport, so that any water that got pulled in by the Wannacomet wells, potentially again for future exposure, would have been treated through the wall. And then also along the southern end of the property as well. So if I go up to this one for a minute. So that the treatment wall would basically be in here to cut off this contamination from going towards Wannacomet, would be in this area to cut off any contamination here from going towards Wannacomet, getting pulled in that direction. And then it would be along here to treat the plumes that come down and move offsite here. Because technically this area along outside the airport fence on MVR is outside the non-potential drinking water source area. So that's actually a GW1 area as well.
Well, could you explain why would we have to do it down there, Mr. Sukup, if it's not the zone 2 and they're connected to mitigate the risk? Why would the groundwater need to be treated on the south side?
Well, that's exactly what we would rely on. I mean, because we've mitigated the short-term risk by connecting everybody up to town water, but theoretically, that groundwater still needs to be cleaned up to drinking water standards because it's outside the non-potential drinking water source area, and it's a sole source aquifer on an island. So technically, that has to be cleaned up to drinking water standards eventually. Now I agree. It doesn't, and that with kind of where you're going with this is that we spent this money to connect these people up. We've identified or mitigated the short-term risk. This strip of land is never going to be developed as a drinking water source. and it discharges to the ocean essentially 100 feet beyond that. So yeah, and that's gonna, that'll be our argument for not
Okay.
installing a curtain in this area.
And then where you do the curtain, which I understand along the zone two boundary, perhaps if that becomes a preferred alternative, is that activated carbon then removed after it's sequestered the PFAS, or it remains? I mean, here we are removing all of this soil that contains the PFAS, or is it that the surface area of the activated carbon essentially captures that PFAS so that it's no longer mobile?
Correct. Exactly. It basically locks it in. It's the stuff that's in the soil is not locked in. If you have rainwater that flows through it, it likes to be in water. So it'll get flushed off the soil into the water. But once it's on carbon, it's stuck there.
Thank you.
So, now there are issues associated with that. It's obviously once the carbon gets filled up, right? Each carbon has certain adsorption sites on it, each grain of carbon. And once that carbon is filled up, it can't accept any more PFAS. So there's a lifespan associated with these curtains, and they need to be replenished every so often. So this is an option that we're not going to pick. It's expensive. It's not all that effective. So we're looking at it just for comparative purposes, and that's the process that we have to go through. But it's not an option that we're going to be pursuing or recommending. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Too many holes with it. Oops, went the wrong way again.
Yeah, please. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the water flow a little bit and the geothermal system. It feels if you are drawing down and cleaning the water up by the Fed, up in that area at the end of runway 15, doesn't that actually arrest the flow towards the town wells and combine that with the actual flow of water going to the south directly away from there on top of that, as you said, it's 700 feet a year? And I'm just kind of curious, say if we did nothing, do you have a sense how long does it take for all that? Because it's not like one pass through the water and all the PFAS is gone, right? It must take, it's got to be it's got a half-life, right? Like the first pass you might get half of it, second one you're going to get 25% and so on, and it's a diminishing return, if I'm not mistaken. So is it 100 years before that would all be clean? I'm just asking roughly. And then I know I keep going back to the geothermal. I think it has a lot of benefits to us to utilize that in what I'm seeing that in the groundwater stuff that you're talking about there as well, and to utilize that to clean up this water to help facilitate that, and it draws in a negative area up in there where it's the highest to keep that water from migrating towards the recharge zone.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, a lot of really good points in there. So to start with your original question, you're exactly right in how you described it as far as kind of a half-life. It's more than just one flushing. It's not just, all water comes in, it's clean and cleans everything and flushes everything right out. You're right. It's because it's absorbed to the soil too. It has to kind of get flushed off the soil. So, again, PFAS is a new contaminant, right? So people are just starting to monitor these sites. We're just learning what that half-life is. There's more and more studies that are being out there, getting published to get a better idea and a better handle on how long that's going to take. The bigger question for us is the soil, is because we've got, again, 30 to 40 feet of unsaturated material here. So this stuff has to get flushed down through a very thick column, 30 to 40 feet of soil before it even hits the water table. And then once it hits the water table, it'll race off to the south. But it's that it's like a sponge. That steady, slow drip out of the soil is what's going to drive the length of time this is going to take. And you're right. I think again, I don't have the answer for that because we don't know how fast the contamination is leaching out of the soil, how fast the PFAS is leaching out of the soil. Again, we'll do that as part of the phase 4. We'll go out and we'll do some leaching tests, and we'll get that data. Basically, what you do is you take a sample, take it to the lab, they put it in a column, and they run water through it, and they test the water over time, and they can tell you based on what's leaching out in the water what that rate is, what that leaching rate is. And then we can extrapolate that to the field scale, and that'll tell us how long it's going to take, if we do nothing, to flush out the soil. And then once the soil is done flushing out, then you look at the groundwater and say, okay, how long would it take to get the groundwater to flush out? To answer your question, you're talking, if we don't do anything, 50, 60, 70 years probably, decades we're talking. It's very, very slow process. But again, if we do stuff like treating the upper 4 feet of soil where the vast majority of the PFAS mass is, if we treat that, now you're removing a lot of mass from the system. So that's going to substantially speed things up. And we can do models. We can run some models as part of phase 4 to kind of get a better estimate of what get a lot like what you guys are doing with the air emissions modeling, to get to get estimates on okay, if you do this, how long will it take? If you do that, how long will it take? How much will it shave off? So we'll be evaluating that.
I'm just also curious, do you know where there's the 3 geothermal wells, 1, 2, and 3, and is that one of those the injection well, or are they just all those 3 suction wells? And where the injection?
I'm sorry. These 3 are the suction wells, the pumping wells. Yeah, the injection wells are up here. So they're up in this corner, up by the rental car lot. So what you're doing is, the highest concentrations we have in the this is the runway 15, right? Here's the runway 15 approach. This grassy area here is where we have the contamination. And there's some pretty high concentrations up here. So what's happening is these wells are right here. And groundwater naturally wants to flow to the south anyway, right? So it's kind of flowing this way. It's flowing towards them. These wells are picking it up, runs through the terminal building, and then it's getting dumped here, getting pumped back into the ground here. So then when it pumps out here, then you got all these homes pumping over here, and it's going out in this direction, and it kind of cut in the corner.
So actually, if you did what you suggested with the filtering there, it actually does what we want it to do, in that we're pulling where the largest concentration of the pollution is in that grass area, coming to the south to where the wells are existing, and it puts clean water up to away in that corner, and it would draw down away from there too, right? I mean, just how it's going to flow in a circle there, right? The suction injection, and would help clean that whole area up there if we treated that.
Yeah, I think we can do it. I think we can do it better. I think if we move these wells up in this area, and this is what our alternative is to basically move these wells up in here, and then maybe re-inject, I don't know, somewhere over here, so that we're basically, same idea. We're pumping this contaminated water out, treating it, and then re-injecting it here. So you're not pushing the water out here. The reason I wouldn't want to, and we could just put the existing, use the existing system and put a treatment system on the existing system and leave it that way. But by continuing to recharge here, it's messy up in here because you've got the plume coming in from Pine Tree. I just want to stay. I want to stay out of this mess. I'd rather have our water, be treating our plume, discharging our water over here completely within the non-potential drinking water source area, away from the residential area, and allow this to clean up as quickly as possible on its own.
So one of the thoughts I was thinking too is if you reverse the flow, right, of the geothermal, and use the suction well, the discharge wells as the suction wells, because all the piping, everything's there. I know you got to get power out there, and then drop some pumps in there, and then you could just flip that around, and like you're saying, you could pull all that contamination away from the residents, right, and then dump it back in over where the larger contamination is already.
Yeah, I'd worry about that. We could model it. We could look at it, that option. But what I would worry is that if you start pumping here, that you might draw this contamination, because you're going to pull from all directions, right? So yeah, you'd be pulling this stuff back, but you'd also be pulling this stuff over, and we don't want to do that.
But we're also pulling it away from the main aquifer, right? Which is our real goal, is to protect, right? Until we can get it cleaned up. Because the main aquifer further to the west, right, and to the north, right?
Well, the aquifer is everywhere. It's everywhere under the island.
I think
The zone two,
zone-
yeah, is up in this area. Right. Yeah,
I'm
that,
hearing
go ahead.
that perhaps one of the alternatives, and this is just, you're the expert in this, but we're trying to, I think, look at it as well, and there's also considerations for the airport. Why wouldn't one of the alternatives being studied be to use the wells that exist? At least in a, perhaps an initial phase, and some of the options that Commissioner Marks just described, and/or I could see a hybrid approach where, just from what you've discussed, where you abandon the discharge by the exit, you maintain the 3 source wells, and then you pump towards the middle of the field. And it would save, I think it would save significant infrastructure cost in terms of going and putting all new wells and piping in if we're just south of it, of the area of concern. I think it could probably get started faster. Yeah, it's just an observation that, you're moving those wells, putting brand new wells in to go 100 feet or something, right? And you are, the contamination's it's going in that direction, as you just said. So is there some benefit to, all the infrastructure is there for those 3 wells, but I fully see your point on the discharge. So you flip the discharge to the middle, maintain those 3. So perhaps that's one of the alternatives that could be looked at. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And I love the idea of treating that, which I think has been brought up, in the past, that I think it's going to get into our discussion on the next item for the terminal.
I just think it's a good way to like be doing multiple things with what we have as resources, right? Like, we really don't want to abandon the geothermal system, because any system you try to put in its place is going to cost us significantly more money to operate. I know there's expense with respect to the, the carbon and all that kind of stuff. I just feel like we need to not just throw that whole thing away. I think it can do us some good with respect to reclaiming the PFAS as well. Just be.
Yeah, no, these are all great ideas. I'm glad we're having this conversation. Obviously, you guys are smart folks and a lot of experience in this area. I think the other thing too is it was my understanding that there's some discussion about maybe expansion of the terminal or some additional changes to the terminal that might affect the HVAC system, and you may be looking at a different system. I don't know if that's true or not.
That's what I was saying about the next discussion. We had all been, I think, going down this, we're gonna kind of meld agenda topics here, I think, a little bit. So maybe but you're exactly right. We've been thinking about how we had to get rid of the geothermal. Mr. Lasden went down this approach of looking at the traditional air handlers and/or closed loop type of systems. And now we're back to where we were. It seems like the win-win would be to polish the water using geothermals, an open loop system. So I think more to come on that, but it seems like if you've got to come up with a remediation alternative on the groundwater, and we've got to have, that might just be where we end up, and that's just part of this process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly, another alternative would be if you did go with a conventional HVAC system, discontinued use of the geothermal system. We could just do a regular groundwater pump and treat system for the plume, which is kind of our third option, or third or fourth option. Where we would just pump the water out from here, treat it and discharge it, and just not have it involved in any kind of heat exchanger type situation to try and use for heating of the building. That certainly makes it a lot cleaner.
But it doesn't really, I don't know that it makes
But it doesn't
economical.
help you with as far as the HVAC.
You're gonna spend all the
You
money.
can spend
on
on the
benefit.
electricity, you're gonna have all the new infrastructure on the new, anyway, I think that what we're coming to, it sounds like, is that we can meld these things together and do both. So continue to be creative.
Exactly, and that's kind of what we're trying to do is with these options, especially with like same situation with the soil, where we talked about capping, concrete, asphalt, vegetated cover. If the airport's going to be long-term thinking, we're going to be doing some expansion in this area. anyway, how can we dovetail that with, future capital projects that, maybe can get more than, additional benefit.
I think we
So-
need to move on. Thank you. Is there more in your, you still, or are we
Nope.
all the way to the
I don't think so.
next
think-
steps, maybe?
I think that was it.
The-
Nope. Yeah, we talked about that.
This is-
Just the overall time frame, which we always have. Just the phase 3 is, like I said, due in March, and then we've got a year to do the phase 4. So that's it.
Okay, so we'll look for our March meeting. We should expect the report. Is there a difference between the IRA report and the alternatives, the phase 3 alternative? So you're preparing 2 reports,
Correct.
and we would have both of those presumably for our March meeting, because you'll have
Yes.
filed the DEP. Perfect.
Correct.
you.
Yes. Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Sukup or Mr. Lasden? Okay, thank you very much for all the work on this. We appreciate it.
No problem.
With that, this is nothing further. Ms. Woods, did you have anything further PFAS related or on the report?
I did not. I think that was a very thorough overview.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Thank you. And back to you, Mr. Carberg.
Okay,
I think
thank you,
we're-
Mr. Chair. And Mr. Sukup, I would invite you to stay for the item after this, where we are going to discuss the terminal geothermal system
Oh,
in a
excellent.
little bit more detail at the commission's discretion.
Just have to find
Please.
out how to stop
you want
sharing.
to-
Oh,
Okay, well, I'll continue.
Yep, reporters.
For recorders, so I toured the site on January 24th with our chairman, the architect, and our OPM. This is shortly after the boxes had gone up and had been delivered. I'm happy with progress so far, and I'd also like to invite any of our other commissioners who would like a tour to reach out to staff, and we can walk you through the site and the building. Let's see, happy to report that the easement requirement with National Grid is out of the right-of-way group and into scheduling. I don't have an anticipated date for placement, but the on-site coordination has begun with local and grid staff, Kobo, and our contractor, which is a good sign. Major items accomplished. The modular boxes have been set, as I mentioned. The trusses and the sheathing are going up. Data and power laid out. The basement slab has been poured. And then over the next 2 weeks, the look ahead is to complete the basement framing, complete the roofing and the high trim, and do the rough in for the electrical, sprinkler, plumbing, and HVAC systems. Any questions on crew quarters before I move on to the terminal optimization projects?
No, thank you.
Okay. So again, understanding it was a great discussion between the commissioners and Mr. Sukup on the geothermal system. I wanted to apologize. I take responsibility for delivering, late to you the consultant's memo on the geothermal system options. So actually, Mr. Chair, I defer back to you. I can have Mr. Lasden and his geothermal system expert return at a following meeting. You can also invite the same from our OPM to discuss what you already have. But I do have that memo and Mr. Lasden available if you'd like him to walk through his work on estimated costs for the options that he has presented.
Yes, please, Mr. Lasden.
Okay. I will attempt to share my screen again. Share. Okay, so everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so we have put together a little report. The report that you see had the original 3 options, which were in the terminal study. which was the electric dry cooler and electric or propane boiler, the heat pump chiller option, and excuse me, and the closed loop geothermal system. Those were all in the original report. We sort of talked about all three of those very high level. The analysis we've done has all been very high level, just to give the commission a general idea of some of the options that would be available. And then subsequent to that, the commission and the airport did request us to look into, as Mr. Zukov just did, maintaining the existing system and treating it. For the maintaining of the system, we kept the wells in their current location. There was some discussions back and forth early on about keeping the wells in the location they are, but certainly it can be modified with Mr. Zukov's opinion on sliding them over to the 15 approach if that's necessary. So again, big picture, just go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody had a question. So the big picture discussion is obviously there's an efficiency of using a geothermal. It's sort of the right idea to do. Yes, there's contamination, but it makes a lot of sense. Although in our study, we have heard from the airport that there are problems with the system. It doesn't work right is sort of a general quote that we've been hearing. So we would have to sort of understand what that term means in order to sort of rehab the system and keep the wells in place. So there would be some work to do on the existing system if we chose to keep that path. The other two options require either substantial modifications or partial modifications of the system you have. In other words, the plumbing, the heat registers, the cooling, the air conditioning units, they all require different modifications. And it's either electric or propane. There is no natural gas on the island. So we did look at sort of those ideas on what could be done as far as the heating system and the cooling system. The first one is the adiabatic cooler and the dry cooler. And again, we have some sort of ballpark prices so you can understand the difference. This is about $1 million in upgrades and costs. But it maintains a lot of the existing units and while it's cheaper, you keep some of the stuff that's there, and maybe that's not the answer. Maybe the idea is to do more of a larger scale replacement. So the next one would be the electric air-cooled heat pumps. This is sort of the modern version of heating. It gives you a lot of flexibility in zoning and in turning off portions of the terminal. If you're not using them, you get much more controlling options in this. But it can be expensive also. It depends on, again, how much we have to change, what we're planning on changing. The third option is the closed loop system, which is still a geothermal system, but there is no, the heat exchange is underground and there's no transfer between the units, so the water is not transferred in from a source well out to a recharge well. And then the fourth one is retaining the existing system. So this was the drawing that was in the program document for the terminal. It shows you sort of the well field for the closed loop system. It takes up quite a bit of the parking lot. It's a whole series of sort of shallow wells, and it's based on the volume of heat and cooling that we need and an expected amount you can get out of each well, and it sort of shows the well field that's there. And then some sort of schematics of what that looked like. Again, the well field and how that would all manifold together. And then we are actually designing a similar system for another client of ours now of a geothermal treatment system. And so we have a drawing of what we did for another client. Just shows you, it would need a separate building. I originally thought I could possibly put it in the old vault building. It wouldn't fit. So one of the options is to sort of build a second building to enclose all of the equipment, the treatment vessels, the piping, the manifolds, all the equipment necessary in another building somewhere at the airport. So again, very high level. We did not go very deeply into any of these topics. This was just here's a couple of high level options that can be moved ahead in the next phase of the project.
You have a recommendation?
The recommendation that we went, if the idea was to not use the existing geothermal system, the recommendation was option 2.
But, and then, Mr. Sukop, if I could, what is the likelihood, and I mean, that as part of the work for phase 3 with DEP, that some level of groundwater treatment is going to be needed?
Could you say that again? What
So
would be the-
do you anticipate that, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just trying to make sure that we understand it, that as you do this alternatives analysis, that especially given the zone 2 contamination, that as part of the phase 3, DEP will in fact be looking for some level of groundwater treatment.
Yeah,
Right.
in that, yeah, the Sun Island and then the at a minimum the runway 15 approach. Yeah, we have to do something up there, something active.
So I think that drives this solution.
It does.
You know,
Yeah,
I think,
agree.
you know,
Yeah.
I think, and combined with everything that we've heard in the piping, and so you're looking at like 3 million, it seemed rough, it seems like something like that, you know, and we start treating the water and
Right.
doing the right thing.
Right.
And, you know, I think that there's a benefit there. I think we can move away from those other alternatives if everybody, you know, agrees, so that it helps to keep you guys focused on what you're working on too, in terms of,
We're not chasing down the rabbit hole.
right, you
Yeah.
know, does that makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. We could continue to work with Mr. Sukoff and his team, and then we will, you know, come up with some thoughts on, does it make sense to use the existing wells where they are, existing well and recharge well, or move it over to the 15 approach, which it sounds like Mr. Sukoff is making a recommendation that will give you the quote better bang for your buck.
And I know just from years of the being in the area that injection well has been problematic over the years. I think they've fixed it all the time, but it overflows into the exit. And then if it's cold, it freezes. I will say I haven't seen that this year. But in years past, I have, you know, observed that. And so I don't know exactly the reason. And, you know, clearly they were able to do something with it, but there's an acceptance rate, obviously, you know, that, so I think this is the way, and I hope that maybe helps inform your alternatives analysis to some extent also, towards maybe a preferred outcome.
I was wondering, Mr. Laniston, if you could provide, not right this second, but at some point, I'm just kind of curious what the loads we're trying to meet in the building are. You know, like tons of air conditioning, you know, load and anticipated flows for those loads. I'm just,
Yes. I
I'm
can
interested.
absolutely give you those. Yeah,
Work a little bit, and I'm just kind of curious to understand what
Sure.
that building, I haven't been able to get that, yeah.
sure,
Thanks.
absolutely. More than happy to get that for you.
Great. Hey, do we need any other direction, any other discussion regarding the terminal optimization, or are we essentially focused on this aspect of it at this point? Mr. Lasden or?
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry. So yes, there was some discussions, and I think the idea was to possibly wait until the new airport manager came aboard, because there was some discussions on, you know, to use the term tent 3.0 and some terminal common use equipment and a couple of other things.
Right,
And so I think from the direction I got was that we would sort of hold off until next month or the month after and sort of regroup with the new management staff.
perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I just wanted to It was still, there was still those other things, but.
Yep,
listen,
yep.
I think the PFAS and the geothermal is, tied together, so. It makes sense to put our resources there at this point.
Right. Plus, we have some talking points with EPA.
Yep.
We're not.
We have a
we're not-
plan.
Yeah, we're not
or
floundering
a
around looking
direction,
at four
a dir-
things. We
you know,
got
maybe
one
not-
thing.
Maybe not full, plan, but there's a direction. To try to do this, so thank you all for that. Anything further on the terminal?
No.
So with that, I think, we're probably okay with, Weston and MJ unless, Mr. Coverage, you have anything, reason that you think they need to, you would hope they would stay on?
No, they're welcome to stay, but I think that was great
Yeah.
discussion, great direction all the way around. So thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just don't want to keep you just to listen to our other stuff. With that, we'll move on to review and approval of the employee housing policy discovered.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. In your packet, I have a draft, not a draft, a final housing selection policy for your review and proposed for approval. The dorm on Nobody Farm Road is proceeding, and we're planning on making use of the one-bedroom dorm manager's apartment for full-time employee housing. This isn't a complex document. I haven't over-engineered it, but it does give what I think is necessary guidance to the airport manager on, processes that they may use to fill the apartment through a defined process of their choosing, including the important one, which is directing the collective bargaining process towards approval if it is a union employee. So with that, I have this policy for your approval, requesting approval, and I would need a vote.
Anybody have any questions on the policy?
No.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Scarron?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. The budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 4 finance items here, and I have Maria Basheva, our finance manager, also able to answer questions. Starting with the budget presentation to the Finance Committee on February 2nd. I'm not going to review it. I just have it as an item in your packets since it was before another regulatory or review board in the town. The Airport Commission has already approved the budget. The next step after having gone to FinCom will be for the airport to present the same information to the select board in an upcoming meeting. At the FinCom meeting on the 2nd, we I gave approximately a 20-minute presentation, fielded some good questions from the membership. Appreciate the process, but I have no further notes on that. For the second quarter report for fiscal year 25, Maria has prepared that and it is in your packet. I'm going to summarize it briefly. I don't intend to give it the same level of review as we did for the first quarter because it is not as significant for our overall budget. Also review the cumulative 6-month data from July 1st through December 31st. So let's see. So backing out the retroactive nature of our adjustments to the fuel revolver cap we made last year, we are at or at a better position financially than the previous year. Fee and rental income continues to increase. After 6 months, we've received 109% of our budgeted revenue for the fiscal year. Expenses, once we account for variation in the timing of our retirement system payments, we're actually down 2% over the quarter. And after 6 months, we have spent 57% of our fiscal year budget allocation. Our debt schedule has not changed since the previous quarter, but I am providing it here for ongoing reference. I know that was brief, but again, it's not as impactful as a quarter than the first quarter, and we would be happy to take any questions, and I will pause there.
Any questions on the budget and finances? Maria, thank you. Appreciate your hard work on that. Great. So we can move on to the airport repayment.
Okay, this is an item where I have a recommendation and I will need a vote from the Airport Commission. I'm asking for your approval via vote to authorize repayment and retirement of our debt to the general fund. For the fiscal year, Ms. Shiva's recommendation, which I support, is to pay our scheduled amount of $235,000 and change, and an additional principal payment of a little over $188,000, less our in-kind services of materials supplied to the DPW, which total a little over $21,000. This payment would be in line with the additional principal payments we've made to the town over the previous 3 fiscal years. I do not believe that making these payments will fundamentally impact our operating budget, our future use of retained earnings. And it would also allow us to retire our $4 million repayment to the town 8 years early. So with that, I am asking for your approval for that.
Discussion. So I guess my only discussion on this, I've kind of the same thing I brought up in years past. We're getting down to the last little bit. I know it's nice to have things cleaned off, but next year, is the town gonna write us a check for that $21,000 in material? Is
Yes.
that that we'll clean this one up, but we will still, and is it likely that they will still want to use those materials if in fact they are, paying for them?
My understanding, I haven't spoken explicitly with Mr. Patno, the DPW director, but the methodology that we provide for the town, it's a rate for, I believe they call it Region 4, which is the Cape and Islands, Mass DOT. So it's a good rate for the product. We don't have to charge them shipping costs to get it here. We have excess material. It goes to a civic purpose. It's something I think the airport and DPW would mutually want to keep moving, but the DPW would have to, in essence, pay us that rate now via an inline or a line item transfer, department to department.
I'm okay with that. I just hope the practice continues. Honestly, we have the material, they need it, but that it wasn't just because it was, coming off the tab, so to speak, versus that they then have to actually, now they have to budget for it where they didn't before. And at 20,000, we could live this along another year or, but I'll defer. Honestly, you both have made a recommendation. And if you think that this is the time to do it, I'm not going to.
I do agree with Mr. Carver, and we can definitely have a meeting with the new DPW director and see how we can explain that we are paying off our debt and we can decide how to do it from next year, and just to be mindful when they're preparing their new budget. But we're going to be processing an invoice from now on for
I think that would be helpful, so they know that's coming. And as a change because of this, the DPW might not know, or maybe they do, but it might be between town administration, town finance and DPW and something like this, where all these years it's been just kind of worked differently. So that's fine. And Mr. Carver, you said you wanted to vote on this. So is there a motion to repay the town in full?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Sparks? Chair votes aye. It's kind of the end of an era there.
You sorry to let that go, or I can second. Feel a reluctance. Yeah, there's therapy later. You need a hug or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Front of the fuel revolver, please.
Okay. As we have for the previous 2 years, we've analyzed the fuel sales for the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year, and we are ready to make an adjustment to the fuel revolver cap. Again, we do this most every year, given the time that elapses between proposing the budget and then the market conditions that result over the ensuing 18 months. And we are recommending an increase to $8.5 million from the $6 million of the current cap. Last year, for reference, our cap increase was to 8.8 million, and the reduction this year is to a slightly lower price forecast. So again, this is really an exercise in moving received and forecast revenue around in an effort to ensure we have the resources that we need to purchase fuel during our busy season, which again happens to be the fiscal year transition right around July 4th. Fuel revolver, it's an administrative item. It takes some time to review, but I still think it's worth it, as its benefits are, and its flexibility are outweighed by the difficulty in managing it. So again, the impact of increasing our revolver cap is that it instantaneously and retroactively reduces the amount of revenue that has overflowed into our operating budget. However, at this point, the concern is moot. Even as we would change it, we still have achieved our fiscal year revenue target of 2.2 million from fuel sales into our operating fund. And then we will continue to accrue revenue to the operating accounts with every fuel sale that we make from now until the end of the fiscal year. So we're happy to answer any questions, but we will look for a motion, if you please, to increase the cap to 8.5 million.
That's your motion. I have a question.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I was just curious, I had to face the possibility of a, what do you call it? When they, import the duty tax, right? For propane, tariff for propane. Got pushed back 30 days, and I'm curious if any of our fuel could be subjected to any kind of a tariff. I didn't know if you'd looked into that at all or even thought about it.
I have not looked into that, and I have not thought about it, and I can't tell you where our fuel is, where our jet fuel is refined. I know, yeah, it goes to the Boston terminal where it comes from. Prior to that, I don't know.
Yeah, because a lot of the fuel in the Northeast comes from Canada, so that's why I bring it up. And even like some of it comes from overseas on a ship, believe it or not. Doesn't need to, but it does. And I was just curious if we could be. I was wondering if you had a sense that we could be affected by that too.
So, without, I don't think I could discuss magnitude, but fortunately, in administering the fuel revolver, if we have something that increases our price exposure, it's very easy for us to come back to the commission, raise the fuel revolver again. Doing the reverse is actually more problematic. It's harder to lower the fuel revolver cap. So that doesn't scare me as much as a major economic downturn or a major reduction in travel. But it's certainly something to consider.
Is there a motion to increase the revolver to $8.5 million?
So move.
There's a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote? Ms. Topham, you with us?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Cameron?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Project updates, Mr. Cover.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the master plan, we are preparing for you a consultant presentation in the March commission meeting with updates and discussion on implementation that will be through Carlin Johnson. For the geometry project, we are still moving forward on these projects, despite some uncertainty on federal enforcement, for example, on the disadvantaged business enterprise plan. And we're still moving forward on those items. Our new ARF truck was received. It looks awesome. There will still be a few month gap while we onboard, inspect, and certify, but it looks great. No update on several projects, continued environmental monitoring, PFAS mitigation, and NEPA. Ramp lighting, thank you for approving the task order earlier. I'm going to hold that project here for future updates. And then for the runway 624 centerline project, I don't have any updates, but I expect that project to pick up pace with as we're expecting warmer weather. For our non-AIP projects, for hangar development, I will be meeting with the Hagedorn group to review the draft lease. I believe we have this scheduled for next week. Fence relocation for the South Shore, we're still working through siting issues with the FAA. Refueling wall repair, no update, but again, this project should start to pick up next month, anticipating warmer weather. The electric aircraft charging station, the layout has been finalized. I believe we're circulating an ALP update via the chair for signature. Our transition plan, I heard it referenced earlier by Cameron. I'll discuss it in more detail during our IFB section. But from an operational standpoint, I don't have any further updates. We have 2 open tenant alteration applications. GJ Smith is working to schedule the water line relocation. I now believe he is targeting the 19th of February. And TSA changes, I don't have an update to their move of the agent station. For the RFP bid status update, we are releasing the invitation for bids for the ARF vehicle phone transition. Those documents will be available to the public tomorrow, and bids will be due February 26th. We are also reissuing a request for proposals to lease 33 Bunker Road. We have previously brought and received approval for the declaration of surplus property to the commission on November 14th, 2023. We still consider that valid. So we haven't brought that back for your reapproval. This RFP will also be available to the general public on February 12th, but because it is a real estate RFP that requires 30 days, responses will be due March 19th. We have a plan holder list that includes all of the businesses who attended an airport commission meeting several months ago. So they will see this RFP and have the opportunity to reply. We have finalized our airline leases and they will be going out soon. We've updated the renewal language to make the periodic renewal within a 3-year term relatively easier. So we don't have to get into the brinksmanship that we've had year after year. Airline corporate legal departments, they tend to take 8, 10, 12 weeks to turn around a lease. So we've changed some language to make renewal easier while still allowing us to implement our rates and charges. The next item up is to issue our request for expressions of interest for the flat top building. But many thanks to Billy, we're moving through some of the procurement backlog that we've had. Any questions before I move on to operations and statistics?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. The operations side, we had a snow event on Sunday, February 9th. We were open by 10 a.m. All move-in areas were clear. Our team did a great job. They attacked it pretty aggressively, anticipating a refreeze. And they were correct. So good job to operations and maintenance departments. Ground frequency, our typical ground frequency of 132.5 is now operating on 128.25. I don't know exactly the issue. It is an FAA tech issue. I'm just providing it as a general purpose update, as we've noticed some signal strength issues when we do our daily radio checks with the ARF vehicles. So for all pilots, of course, we'll refer to official sources. No update on fence repair or PCI inspection. On our fuel reservations, as I reported last month, we've received our allotment from the steamship. It's a good allotment, but we're still 5 to 6 reservations short of what I would like to see guaranteed for July and August. We have a good relationship with the steamship, working informally with them, and I've reached out to let them know about the shortage I foresee, and that we can work with them either formally or informally. Again, I'd much rather have reservations printed in paper on our sheet, but especially as they bring larger boats online, I'm hoping that more spaces will be available and we can take advantage of that. For statistics, operations were up 36% in December, or 872, and they're up 4% year to date. Southwest ops were up 49%, or 424 for December. And employments were up 57% in December and up 11% year to date. For Cape Air, Boston was up 28%, New Bedford was up 6%, Hyannis was up 312%, or 556 in plane passengers versus 135 for the previous December. And that's the 10th month of greater than 200% growth in that market. And then the Vineyard was up 27%. Jet A is up 4.3% over the 3-year to-date average. It's also up 26.2% over the 3-month average and the month averages. 100 low lead is up 12.6% over the 3-year average, 15.8% over the previous 3 months, and 6% over the previous month. Freight was down 1% for December and 15% on the year to date. Cape Air Freight and FedEx were up this previous month of December, but the US Mail and UPS were down. I included a handout report on TNC activity. We now have a full calendar year of reporting data. I'm just glossed through a couple items because I find it really, really interesting. I think we're the first source I know of on island to quantify TNC ridership. So again, TNC is the acronym Transportation Network Company. It encompasses the firms Uber, Lyft, and then there are a handful of minor operators, but Uber and Lyft are the ones we track and have agreements with. So again, as a reminder, the airport charges $3.50 per originating pickup. Similar to how we treat our taxis, drop-offs are free. We average over 100 TNC pickups a day in the summer. I use our daily screen passenger counts as a basis for comparing this on a per passenger basis. It's not perfect. You know, we probably average more than one person per pickup, and we have other arriving passenger sources in general aviation, but on a whole and for a daily basis, I think it's helpful. What we found is a large share of our passengers utilize these TNCs. It's a consistent revenue source. It exceeds, I believe, what we get combined from cabs and liveries. You know, looking to the future, I'd suggest further negotiations when we renegotiate those agreements with Uber and Lyft, really to increase the receipt of data. I'd really like to know the number of passengers in those originating. You know, my experience for year one administratively, you know, very few issues. There are a few that are mediated sort of on-site by our ground transportation coordinator, but they're the same as they would for taxis or, you know, other well-wisher friends and family pickup and drop-offs. And then for noise, I had 0 noise calls and no APU events reported. Any questions before I move on to personnel?
No, thank you.
Okay. So we have hired Devin Nugent as our new janitor. If you recognize Devin, it's because he has been a seasonal fueler with us at the FBO for, I believe, at least 2 seasons. So we would like to welcome him on board. We are interviewing for our maintenance M1 positions. I believe we've held interviews, and I'll look when I'm back for a status update from staff. Ms. Crooks, as you know, who we had a retirement party for and has been working remotely, has given us her last date. I believe that will be April 28th, and we are advertising to fill her position. Cameron Woods, our environmental coordinator, is now in a remote role. I'm grateful that we have her remotely. However, we're also advertising for that position concurrently with her remote role, and we're beginning to see interest. And then for my own announcement, which you're all well aware, this will be my last commission meeting as your airport manager. So I wanted to take a moment and thank you for your leadership and your friendship over the previous 12 years. So I'd say that running a safe airport starts from the ground up. And for that, I want to recognize the team I work with every day. You know, they're great. I don't have much more to say than they're great. And I will thank them even more in person and when it's their turn to be thanked. But today is a commission meeting. And so I wanted to reach out and thank the commission, because running a safe airport starts from the ground up, but running a successful airport starts from the top down. And that begins with your strategy and your direction. And I think when an airport manager is as fortunate as I have been, they can marry the safety culture of aviation with the performance culture of a business enterprise. And to that end, it's been my experience, you've established goals, you've given me the resources to meet your expectations, and then you've allowed us as staff to execute our roles. This may not sound like a lot to the public. I don't think they necessarily recognize that, but they should. The role that the commission has had to deliver our organizational mission. They provided exceptional oversight. And, sometimes, guys, I wish you were in charge of more things than just the airport, but you're doing a great job with the airport. I'll look back fondly and with gratitude for the opportunities I've had here, and I wanted to thank you for your part in enabling them. And those are my prepared remarks and conclude my report.
Thank you.
Thanks, son.
Appreciate those comments very much. Commissioners' comments.
Just that I'm gonna miss Noah.
Yeah, I'd like to take a minute, likewise, just to share a couple of comments and wish Noah well on his way. I recall back sort of when you started with the airport and in the environmental role and working together. One of the first things that Noah did that impressed me, and it took years, but a couple of years, I would say, and that's I think credit and testament to him was the restoration of a positive relationship with natural heritage. When he started, the airport was, shall we say, not in good standing, generally speaking, with some of the requirements and permitting and through, I think, his strong environmental background as well as dedication to the job and I think manner that he approached that. And I really saw it in my participation with him at the technical advisory committees on an annual basis. And I think it really showed me he was just a great guy to work with and really cared and did a really good job there. So and that went on for quite some years. I think it got better and better to the point that those meetings got shorter and shorter as we did that, which is, I think, that really shows you that you're heading in the right direction. And then, transitioning from there to assistant town manager, assistant airport manager, working with Tom. I think, you really did a great job in that role. And then in your leadership position as the manager, you really faced some, as we all did, but you as well, challenging situations through PFAS, continued from Mr. Rafter, but then specifically into the South Ramp expansion project and the concerns and challenges we faced there. You did an exceptional job, and it was noted. So we wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors, and you will be missed from both the airport and the community.
Thank you.
And I would like to echo some of those thoughts that you said, Art. I think that you've done a great job. I was surprised at how quickly you took over for the assistant manager. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, Noah. Any public comment?
We don't have any.
Okay, and with that, we would entertain a motion to go into executive session for general law section, chapter 38, section 20, to review executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda for review possible release. Discuss strategy with respect to pursuing legal claims against manufacturer of PFAS, other sources of PFAS. Discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Turo, and discuss strategy. Well, the last two would be where the chair is determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the airport commission, and finally discuss strategy sessions, preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, and conduct bargaining sessions, contract negotiations with non-personnel for the airport manager, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Sparks?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
You guys got some things for us to sign and maybe we can start this